the Instagram or the Zoom. We're picking Zoom. But if you're in the room, you've got a step ahead. Now let's see here. I am going to turn video on, and then I want to make sure. Awesome. We do not want to unmute myself. Okay, so if you're joining on Zoom, again, the red lipstick, there's no two ways about it. Again, if you're on Zoom, I'm hoping someone can let us know. We are on mute, and I'm in the room. So can they hear me somehow? That might sound silly, but they've got us in the room, technically speaking. But I want to be able to. Oh, excellent. Okay, I want to be able to present from my computer, and so while we have the awesome tech capacities of the camera, I'm hoping this is a way we can separate the camera from the audio. But I will say, if there's a wicked delay because of it, we will figure it out. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. It looks like everyone can see the chat. Awesome. Well then, what I want to do is pull all this. You got too many tabs open, and that one, I love the expert desktops. It also makes like little doom piles of desktops all over. But we are going to hop on. I'm hoping if you're on Zoom, oh God, here I was doing the live and I was just talking in the air. Okay, so I want the live to be able to see me and the presentation. We'll see if we have to pick. Okay. Alrighty, everybody. This is the fear of professors. You're afraid you're going to stop learning technology, but then you also just still have to do technology in front of everybody. Oh no. Okay. So hopefully our Zoom compatriots are seeing the following slide that we in the room are seeing as well. Let's do a thumbs up. Can you guys see and hear me now on Zoom? Let's give us a thumbs up one way or the other. Got a couple. Yay. Okay. Awesome. Now, what is it? This is normally how I start most of my classes. I like the Zoom link, but it also requires the patience of everyone in the room. So I thank you guys for bearing with us. I did remind you all to go ahead and grab food and drink at the back. I'm hoping that we will have time to mingle more after for the vigil. So if we have any left, that's the cool part. But we don't know who all might come for that. So now's the time to get your cookies. Now, I want to start first with silence. I think we're going to go on a heck of a whirlwind in the next hour, give or take. I want to save time for Q&A, but I also felt today really wanting to take a chance to do some storytelling. I think that's the best way we teach and the best way we learn. But I also wanted everyone who came here today to leave with a primer of sorts on this issue, so that wherever you find yourself in the rooms from here on out, you have a chance and can speak on it in a good way. Finally, I want to focus on prevention. I think this was something I've been thinking about as a professor. I really feel a lot of reflection on how we address the crisis and points of intervention. You'll learn more today about my work with the California Department of Justice. If I stand over here, okay, the Instagram can see me now. I can do it all. I work with the California Department of Justice. Previously, I worked with my tribe, the Yurok tribe, the largest surviving tribe in the state of California. I'll share a little bit more about us shortly, but I also come to this issue as in many ways, by the time we're talking to the police or looking at this as a criminal justice system issue, that's far too late. I know firsthand from some of the cases I have been closer to that the questions and the answers start well before someone is worried and before that call that no one wants to make is made. And I think in many ways, I want us all to be really gentle with ourselves today. That's why I'm encouraging you to tend to your animal body, whether it's getting up to get food, getting up to go to the bathroom, or just getting up to move. You may very well kind of get a lot of that in your body as we sit here. And I just thank you on the front end for being willing to share this space with the families and the survivors of the missing and murdered crisis, because this is their reality every day. And what is often the most difficult part of my work is that for many in America, this is an issue they know very little about. It's incredibly far removed, and it will be their chance today, in whatever way, to learn more about it. Others, if you're in a Native community, a tribal community, it is more often likely that you know someone, that you are less than one or two people removed from an active case. And so it's something that actually could not be more real to you and is all-encompassing, for better or for worse. And so I want today to be able to sit in that space together. And I did not pause for a light prayer, but I would like to do that. We're going to speak on that more during the vigil. But if you guys would allow me a moment. Creator, Wakao, for bringing us here today. I ask that you give us all the chance to learn and approach this topic with a kind and gentle heart, to hold space for things that are generations old and may very well require generations to fix. But I feel in this moment we are having a chance to turn those tides. But we need people beyond myself and my community members to know about it. And so I ask that you let my words fall on open ears, and that everyone here takes their knowledge in a good way moving forward. Prayers for everyone who's loved someone impacted by this crisis. Prayers for the river and the salmon. I'm happy they're coming home with the dam removal. And prayers for those who we will see again in a good way, who've been taken by the missing and murder crisis. Wakao, wakao, wakao. Okay. Now, I knew, how many minutes did I get in? I knew I would probably start getting emotional, and I do ask that you guys allow some space for that, because, like I said, this is an issue that I, 9 times out of 10, am using my big words for. I am hired in 2 different ways to do this work, and it's important work. I feel no more immediacy and just galvanized to action than I do when I'm doing this work with the degree and the things that I wanted to do when I was a young kid in college saying I wanted to do X, Y, Z. I know that I'm right where I'm supposed to be doing it. But it's also deeply emotional work. And in many ways, it is because it's not just something I know about through my work as a scholar. Now, as I said, I want to front stage, no matter what we talk about today, with the fact that even as real as this is today for us, this has not always been our world. And in fact, it is a recent imposition of settler colonialism and the invasion in particular that we find ourselves in a missing and murdered epidemic. It is a system by design in many ways that we don't know where our people are or when they're hurt, or the fact that they're targeted for violence in the first place. That being said, I am fortunate to say that I have the benefit of a 7th generation perspective, and I know that these, although they stand on my neck today, these were not how my ancestors lived their lives. And by having access to a long line of ladies, I have a chance to lean into those teachings, and hopefully those are the very same teachings that we will use to address this, because even as tribes aren't why this is happening, it will fall to us to keep our people safe. It's always fallen to us, and in many ways it's our ability to not keep our people safe that we find ourselves today in the many conditions and outcomes we see. That's why I asked the question, how many times could we make them safe? Because a lot of times we want to ask questions about what someone did or what conditions or rooms they found themselves in, when we got to ask ourselves, why are those people so easy to find? Why are those conditions and scenarios so easy to be in? Why am I hunted today like those before me were hunted then? I am going to share a little bit more about my connections and the connections to kind of what this looks like on a human level. But this really cool film came out at Sundance a couple years back. It's really hard to watch because it talks about really sacred things. So I only ever get to show the trailer. But in the event I ever got to host it, trust me, we would get to do something just like this. But I'm hoping, I want to Probably going to have to toggle the volume so that we can hear it on Zoom. So let's see here. Okay, I don't want an echo, so we're going to do this. Okay. Almost, yeah. Okay. Is it going to echo? We're not hearing it, are we? We hear me. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay. Try this again. Okay, we still can't hear it. I know we'll get through this together. Let me see if I have both on. What'll happen? If feedback happens, I apologize, and I'm gonna turn it right back off. But
then we remove your tongue.
Oh, okay.
And you're reborn as a woman.
Am I blushing? The computer was on mute. I am. Hey, good. I'm human. It's true. Oh, I tell everyone twice a year. Okay, let's try this again. If you're on Zoom land, thanks for bearing with us. Okay.
I sent the snap to our whole group chat and was like, guess who started her period? It's like, wait, this means that I'm going to have my flower dance this year. Okay.
My fingers. So you're blinded for 4 days. And then we remove your tongue. And you're reborn as a woman.
When they ask us, well, what was your flower dance like? And then you're like, well, I didn't have one. And then it's like, well, why?
So just like everything we do, right? We put good thoughts into that food.
That dance floor is your world. Don't be afraid of anything that comes out there.
Recording in progress.
So now you're coming in as a girl and come out a woman. That's what we do. We perfected that process.
All right, Cindy. Well, I love you. You're going to do great, okay?
Okay. Love you.
Okay. See you in the morning.
See you.
Okay. Now let's. Oh no. Okay, not that way. That way. Okay. I've done something wrong. How about that one? Nope. Okay. Hold on, guys. I was like, which mute is wrong?
Are you connected on Zoom here?
I am.
Okay, so this one has to be muted, this one unmuted.
Okay.
So.
And then, yeah, that's what's wrong.
Yeah. And then you can share your content through here.
Okay, perfect. Well, now I don't feel so silly earlier for it being on mute. We'll get through it together, guys. If it's not the Wi-Fi going down, it's something else. But let's see here. We're going to share screen back to our stuff. Now, I share the long line of ladies. I actually, if you've seen my presentation before, you will know that I typically actually start this in a different place. And I want to amend how I tell this, because at the end of the day, I don't want to find ways to prevent us from dying. I want to find ways to help us live. And while that might seem like a very small difference in words, it actually is on the level of paradigm difference. Like thinking of a world where Indigenous lives are thriving. That is the world we came from before. And through our ancestry, that is the world we have ties to. And in many ways, I think right now we see ourselves in a world that's struggling to see a way different. And we're lucky that if you are Indigenous, you have access to, in your body even, a world that was different. And it's going to be us bringing that world to life, the first step is just even knowing that it's possible. And in many ways, I know that this is true because it's not just true for me. I have here a collage. I wish I had, I needed more pictures, and I wanted to do a collection. Some of them are pictures of my family members. Some of them are people I went to high school with. Growing up, like I said, I am a member of the Yurok tribe, the largest surviving tribe in California. We are located about 6 hours north of the Bay Area, right on the Klamath River, where the redwoods and the salmon are. That is our home. And I'm actually the kind of person who didn't really know how big a redwood was or how lucky I was to have them till I went to live back east. And let's just say we have bigger trees where I'm from. I didn't realize how lucky I was. But not only am I lucky that that's just where I've called home, but it's where my people have called home for time immemorial. My maternal line goes back to this place forever, and many of the women that I now have included in the database of a certain age that have been taken through violence in our state, and in particular the northern part of our state, which you'll learn a little bit more about shortly. They aren't people that I knew about because we found the report online or their family had brought us the info through a focus group. It was because they were people I had grown up with, people I had gone to school with. Right now, at minimum, I would say, since I began this work in 2016, but really picked up steam in 2019, 4 people that I went to K through 12 have been taken through violence, missing or murdered. If it was 12 people in a school of thousands, that'd be one thing, but our graduating class in high school was 250 people. So these were people that I had known since I was very young. And that's hard to know because I came to this epidemic as a scholar. I was a prisoner reentry and unemployment, poverty, inequality. That's what my first book's going to be about. And my tribe was starting to work on missing and murdered. And it was because, as I'll show you later, a great majority of the cases in California are exclusively taking place in the northern part of the state, almost exclusively in a 2 to 3 county region, of which a large part is my tribe's ancestral territory. And so it's our women being taken. It's also people who come there, both native and non-native, who are taken. You don't want to play into media portrayals too much, but if you've ever seen Murder Mountain on Netflix, I'm from Humboldt County, that's home. And that, I was like, I don't know who's watching in the world, but that stuff's real. For better or for worse, this is a place where people very frequently go missing or are taken through violence, but this is disproportionately true for our indigenous women and Two-Spirit relatives. Now, I will share maybe a little bit more about these guys in the vigil, but I did want to say their names now. Tawny Irvin, Mariah Lindgren, Emily Risling, and Kason Crutchfield are all people that their families and their communities consider as lost to this epidemic. They are here included in the different media coverage on, different ways they were taken. And why I think it's important to start with a tangible example of vibrance and to end with vibrance is because at the end of the day, I hate that if you were to Google any of these people, this is what would come up. This is how they're remembered. And so as we work on this epidemic, we also have to realize that each of these people is so much more. I mean, this I wish, I got a lot of things going on, so I should have prepared longer, but I took only a little bit to get these pictures together, and it was just the thought of, when we're talking about this, we have to realize that, yes, the numbers are hugely important because certain eyes hear certain things, and if they don't see it as real to them in a certain, usually quantitative data way, it's not real. But we have to realize each one of these numbers, each one of these cases, every line in our Excel spreadsheet is a real person, and that every one of those people has a family, and every one of those people mattered and had someone wondering where they were the minute the worst was feared. And what can sometimes be hard to read about kind of research and coverage is that sometimes there's an expectation that wouldn't be true. That the people who are targeted for violence or have been taken through missing and murdered are people that weren't deeply loved, that weren't deeply traditional, who weren't having people looking for them from the first minutes they were worried about them. I think of Emily in particular. She was the year ahead of me in high school, and I had looked up to her my whole life. She's always someone, I want to transition into my work and what I do, but I did forget I had this. This is my fam. This is, I don't have my tattoo, but if anyone's seen my sleeve, this is my great-grandma, my great-great-grandma, Alice Spot. 2 different pictures of her. I wish I had the one of her smiling. I should have dug it up. And then my grandma, the link in between us. And I always like to show this because, we know so much about how trauma travels across time. I mean, tribal communities have known since contact, and we haven't known perhaps the words and the DNA epigenetic mechanisms, et cetera, but we have known on a soul wound level that we have been hurt, and that without the medicine for that wound, it accumulates across time. It's called historical trauma, but then we also see the accumulation of trauma with the things we experience in our own lives. But a lot of people don't know, but if you've been in any of my classes, you learn, I'm pretty sure both learn, that trauma is something that if, you're connected to your grandma through your mother, that as an egg cell inside the fetus that was your mother, you walked with your grandmother in those first neonatal times. And that means then that what your grandma experienced, a lot of times people want to say this issue is so long ago, get over it. What does it matter? Well, when you count it up in grandmas, it's a lot closer than you think. I also, though, I always like to share this, though, because I am someone who has spent a lot of time far from home, and I never realized how unique the California Indian experience was until I got a chance to kind of experience the diversity of Indian country at large. And it's a gift that we are now in a position to lead the way in this issue, because although our contact story is much more recent, it wasn't until after the discovery of gold in 1849 that anyone who was non-native lived up that far north, or in the state at all, basically, at least northern Central California. The missions having a separate but adjacent history. If we think of California essentially as one of the last frontiers, which meant we needed it to be rid of Indians sooner. And so in the first 2 years after gold was discovered, by all accounts, 2 out of 3 California Indians were dead, which means that anyone today who is a California Indian is the descendant of a genocide survivor. That also means that in a global sense, we have a perspective on things that, unfortunately, we have lived through the apocalypse a few times on a soul and a cultural level. And we are fortunate, though, that even with that, we have access to our culture. We were never removed. Our reservation sits within some of our most sacred places. And so we have that direct tie to our land, which is vital for us. And I make a claim, probably every indigenous people, that is the source, that is the heart of it all. And that's also why our women are hurt, because the land is the source and our women are the brokers of that relationship. Now, to dive back into today, you see, as I said, I have worked on this project formally now since 2020. We actually got the funding on the eve of the pandemic. I remember December 2019, I just offended. I'd come back for a victory lap at home, and we'd gotten this funding, and we just were going to dream up this most amazing project. We all know what happened just a couple months later. But I'm also very happy to say that we, as a tribe, did incredible work to document the scope and severity of missing and murdered in the northern part of the state, which is hugely important now that we know what it looks like across the state as a very regional problem. Not to say that every region does not also experience this, terribly so, but because think of beyond this issue, the different variations across California and how that has ramifications for a whole host of interventions, institutions, what have you. Missing and murdered is no different, but my work starts with my tribe. And Emily, like I said, she turned 35 this February. She's a mother of 2. Her son is a teenager, not quite yet, I guess a middle schooler, maybe a teen, I don't know, it happens fast. He's right there though, and then her daughter is still just a toddler, and she came from one of the most connected dancing families in our community. She was someone who I'd looked up to since I was a teenager because she was so culturally grounded and had literally family on every river, in every village. That also meant that when she fell on hard times, and as a result of both domestic violence and mental health conditions, coupled with substance use disorder, it was not for the lack of trying across quite literally almost an entire county and multiple tribes worth of resources and apparati, if that's some apparatuses, whatever that word is, to try and help her. And at the end of the day, that is what grips my chest most, is if Emily can be taken, there's no one who's safe. There was no one more loved. There was no one more protected. There was no one more cultural, no one more grounded. And none of that changed how we talk about her now. I didn't know there was something worse than finding out your loved one had been killed, but there is. It's never knowing what happened. It is something that takes from you on the level of bone. Think of all the happy occasions that, when someone's gone, you get that chance to mourn. And that's what often I've been learning in my work. One thing that's difficult is that although death and grief, loss looks different post-invasion, many tribes, my own included, had ways to deal with death. We had ways to deal with loss. And those allowed us to grieve and to send those people on their journey in a good way. And when we don't get that closure, when we don't get their body, we don't get that chance. And that is something that, again, has only a magnifying loss across time. And I, at the same time, had the chance because, as I said, I was working this, and honestly, she was just a very close friend. She was my right hand during my dissertation. None of the things that I did that you'll see someday in my book would have been possible without Emily. And she actually at one point told me, we got to help our guys first. In our way, we have always been healers. Our women are our doctors. And she said, our men are sick. We made it out. We got to college. We got our degrees. We need to help our guys, and then we can tell our story. She won't be here to write that story with me. And I can't even say that her story would have started when she started getting locked up or when she started getting picked up because she was walking around nude and doing things that should have, perhaps in a white woman, been seen as reasons to get her help, or not seen as reasons to get her help. No matter how many times she was picked up and released, for some reason there was never any bookings. There was never enough to go on. She was brilliant. And so when she could talk her way out of some stuff. And quite honestly, she needed intervention that would have been mandated, court mandated. And she actually was arrested roughly 2 weeks before she went missing. And as is the case with many of our missing and murdered cases, that because we refuse to respond to the mental health crisis, because we refuse to support our lives before we're taken, it is the jailhouse that sees us last. And so no one really knows who the last person to see Emily was, but everyone wonders, had the judge kept her? Had they taken her to treatment? Had there been a facility in the area that could accommodate her co-occurring issues of substance use disorder and other mental health conditions? If that had been the case, would we have the missing persons flyer up today? And it was a front row seat to what happens when a case like that comes in, where the ball is dropped, who falls through the cracks. And at this point, it was 2 years in October. I don't like saying it will be 3 years this October, because I hope that between here and October, maybe someday I could say that's when she was missing, but maybe we'll say someday that we were able to put her somewhere where her family can visit her, where we could give her those things so she can go in a good way. But like I said, if it could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. And so I am keeping an eye on the time. We will, at about 6 o'clock, we're going to open it up for questions. But I did want to share a couple of clips because Emily's case has been covered in different ways. And it's always hard because her family's been talking about it for 2.5 years now. How do you heal? You don't heal until you know what happened. But how do we ask them to keep telling their story without something coming of it? And so I first just have to thank the Risling family and families like them for being willing to bring their pain for us to learn from. And with that, I want to share some videos as well as, is this? Yeah, it is a video of a song that is now often sung to honor those taken, but is sung by Emily's family. Let's see here. Okay, now time out though. Last time we did the video, everything imploded. I am going to... I'm sorry the speaker's quiet because we're not plugged into the room, but we're gonna unmute this ×2 and mute that one. Yeah, okay. Unmute and then nope.
We had reports that a school bus drove by, saw her on the bridge naked.
She went missing in early October. Every day, the frustration of wanting some, movement to having things getting done. It's very difficult.
Now, this is Emily. There's a lot of Emily around here right now.
It's an eagle feathers. This is all like beaded. We had so much fun that day. There's a great picture of her and me from that day, but I don't know where that picture is.
Oh God, it's so tiny. The disappearance and deaths highlight a crisis plaguing Native American communities nationwide.
Particularly in reservations and village areas, there is a maze of jurisdictions, of policies, of procedures, of who investigates what. I worked with a family where for 3 days they couldn't get anybody to investigate the rape because the county, the state, and the tribal police couldn't determine who had jurisdiction.
Families of the missing and/or murdered Indigenous women, they need somewhere to go. And so when they go to the law enforcement, they're not thinking about the jurisdiction.
Oh, the sheriff.
They're thinking about how can we get help finding our lost relative.
Oh, no, this one says it. Yeah. Humboldt County Sheriff hasn't done more. It says it's a tribal police issue and declined to comment. Her family's frustrated.
Early on, there should have been a bigger search for her. And I realize it's a very remote area, but, Hoopa police, Yurok police have very small, they don't have a lot of help, right?
Quite honestly, the community and the tribe as a government is getting frustrated and they're tired of the appearance that our Native people are not getting the attention that they see with other missing cases locally and across the country.
It's real difficult when you deal with the grandkids and the grandkids Grandpa, can you take me down the river and can we look for my mom? What do you tell him? We're looking every day. And there's a lot of people looking. And he says, what happens? We can't find her.
Emily's a beautiful person, and she needs to come home to her children.
Area that's all public and they can access.
Tribal and local police and volunteers are preparing to search a vast area of Northern California wilderness for a missing Native woman. 33-year-old Emily Risling, a mother of two, was last seen near this village on the Yurok Native American Reservation in October.
The community is determined to get an answer. What that answer may be, I don't know, but an answer can bring closure.
Growing up, Emily was a promising student and an expert traditional dancer. Blythe George was a close friend.
She always had a sparkle and a smile, and I gravitated towards her and thought the world of her.
But as Emily grew older, she suffered from mental health problems and substance abuse. In this impoverished tribal community, it was difficult to get her the help she needed. According to the FBI, 5,295 Indigenous women were reported missing nationwide in 2020. Native American women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other ethnicity. More than 1/2 of all Native women have experienced rape or other sexual abuse. George is working to assemble a database of the missing and murdered women.
We are disproportionately experiencing violence across the life course. For Indigenous people, it's often a different race hurting you, and that goes back to the settler colonialism.
Indigenous women are preyed upon because tribal police are often underfunded and under-equipped. Overlapping police jurisdictions make criminals think they can literally get away with murder, says Yurok tribal judge Abby Abenanti.
It is somebody who is killing who knows there's sort of no harm, no foul, because they're not going to be pursued, and in fact they aren't.
The Yurok tribe wants funding for investigators and equipment to conduct searches and better mental health care access. Last year, President Joe Biden signed an executive order on murdered and missing Indigenous women, directing federal agencies to help coordinate investigations and improve safety.
Thank you. The fates of many of the Native women who have gone missing amid these dense and remote forests may never be known. But their families and tribal officials vow never to stop searching for answers.
We need to get her home, so she'll be at least have that, you know. That's our responsibility, to bring her home.
Gone, but never forgotten. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, on the Yurok Reservation in California.
My cousin Emily's song, and we share it with you in her honor. And she sang it in our ceremonies that happen along the villages and along the river, and I know of our communities here in Humboldt County. So I'll go ahead and end with singing her song.
And no
our missing relatives, we don't know where you are, but you're always in our hearts. We love you.
Now, I want to show you kind of what has come from this work. In many ways, what's difficult about this topic on, I'd say, a fundamental level is that it's actually not old. It is old. It's not new. It's not something that just started when we started keeping numbers. It's not something that's just started with media coverage and the like. It's something that goes back to the first contact, the first invasion, depending on who you ask, how it's called. And I want to, in the time we have left, kind of give you guys some background and why, when someone makes that claim, I'd like you to be able to at least see the line of logic. I'd like to show you some of the stuff that we've done with the Yurok and California projects on this. I will also say, if anyone is here in the room, on Zoom, wherever, and you are a member of a tribe, if you're part of tribal governance in any capacity, we are actively recruiting for our Department of Justice interviews, and it's hugely important that we get diversity across the state. And I will say, in many ways, we see kind of a regional experience, and we can't speak to that experience in the Central Valley, for example, without having people who can bring that to us. So you'll see my contact info on the last slide, but please let's talk more when we're here together, because you're talking to the person. Let me, oops.
It's at the conference.
I was going to say, yep. Oh, thank you. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. Now Zoom is. Okay, we're on. I did one of the mutes, I guess. Hopefully we're okay now. Zoom, somebody give me a thumbs up. Whew. Just when I get going. I think in the time left, I kind of wanted to give you some stuff with some teeth to show you what this looks like in a historical perspective, but also what is it that we know right now. I'm trying to go backwards. I think it's important to acknowledge first that targeting women for being women, that is part of rape culture at large. That is misogyny. To bring current events into things, there was a stabbing in Australia where a majority of the victims were women. I saw a selection of memes basically saying, misogyny is a form of terrorism. Why do we not see it that way? And I think what's ironic is it's probably one of the more universally experienced forms of terrorism, if you at least think of the fact that there are, if we have been likened, indigenous people, tribal people, they say we're the canary in the coal mine, that we are the thing that alerts you to danger, that it will inevitably befall everyone else. And the things I'm speaking about, the ways our women are hurt, the way we are hunted from our first moments, this actually is deeply familiar for at least approximately half of the population. And that's because the way we are hunted today as women, we were first hunting indigenous women in that way. And it is almost a constant expression of that kind of settler colonial line of thought that honestly, when it saw our communities, when it saw women who were vibrant, who walked and moved in the world as equals, who were sacred and shepherded the sacred nature of their communities, it was something that had to be targeted, exterminated, and annihilated for the continent to be settled. That's not unique to the American experience. We see that around the globe. And it is in many ways because even though they didn't have eyes to see how important and valuable that world was, they could at least appreciate that our women were the vehicle by which they got to the land. And so they targeted these things together. And that's why in present day, we also see that this crisis in particular, now quick pause, you do see different acronyms used. The missing and murdered, if we think of missing and murdered as, it's adjacent to essentially the process of colonization and in turn industrialization. And so when we see, the different acronyms, we see MMIP or MMIR, missing and murdered indigenous relatives. I think that one is what we're going to see more of, because you don't want anyone to feel left out. Unfortunately, our male-bodied relatives also experience grievous violence, of which I'll speak on shortly. But we also, again, it's because of that connection between the land and our women, our girls, and our two-spirit relatives that we see this epidemic particularly impacting female-bodied and two-spirit relatives. Now, the man camps, that's sometimes what they're called when you see kind of largely men employees at kind of industry camps in places where extractive industries are still kind of the main way of, the big industries. You can kind of think the gold rush as the quintessential example. I always love to, this can sound messed up, I always like to tell people this, only because I think we should know. Redskins, obviously we've changed that name, as we should. Do you know what the 49ers were? You know what the 49ers were? Like even what it's a reference to? Also, I'm a Raiders fan, so like we could probably say both of these. We could say Raiders and 49ers are synonymous. The 49ers are a reference to the first miners who settled the state in 1849. They were rapists, they were murderers, they were genocide enactors. That is not usually known about the 49ers as a name, but that is what it is recognizing. Not on purpose, but if you know who and what happened at first contact, that is where you see us acknowledging in a certain way an unspoken history that once you know more about it, you'd wonder what else should we be rethinking. Nonetheless, though, the gold rush, that's kind of the quintessential example, but it goes to present day, whether you're looking at places like Alaska, where you're seeing really extreme extractive industries and a high male-to-female ratio, which in turn is highly correlated with a per capita rate for rape that is 3 times the national average. This is also, like I said, it's not just an American experience, a Canadian experience even. We see it arguably across the globe. The example of maquila workers in Mexico, young women coming to the city to work, help their families, and they are in a way targeted explicitly for violence because that movement of expressing their freedom and their autonomy is interpreted as license and almost permission to hurt them. Juarez is where you see a lot of the kind of coverage of that coming out. But again, this isn't any one state, any one country that does it. It is by design. It is the system of settler colonialism. And it's only in present day that we're calling it missing and murdered, and we're showing how we don't have certain numbers, but it's also something that if you are from this community, you know is more real than the air you breathe. Because in order to keep breathing air, you got to know is real. Now, Canada is a really important example to learn from, the Highway of Tears. Essentially, we can look to Canada for some tangible examples where we're seeing serial killers, roving serial killers even, target Indigenous bodies for violence. I think a lot of people don't know that according to the FBI, there's 1,500 actively circulating serial killers in America by the estimates of bodies found. They don't know where they're at, but they find the bodies. And you should know they circulate the interstates. 99 isn't an interstate, but it's pretty damn close. And so the canary in the coal mine, though, if we can understand what's happening in our community, we can speak to this violence and head it off in others. Because we are also experiencing simultaneously what's been called a cold case crisis, which I'll show a little more on the next slide. But essentially, if we think about California in the scope of missing and murdered, our records show that it is in the top 5 states. That's very much a reflection of the violence we're seeing in the northern part of the state, coupled with the fact that California is the most populous state for American Indians in the country. So we are seeing people be hurt and lost to the epidemic whose homelands aren't in the state, but are included in our work right now as part of the Department of Justice, trying to understand and how to honor even if your tribe isn't in the state. They at the same time have a right to protect you. How do we start building those mechanisms? In 2020 to 2021, there was 18 open cases in California, and nearly 60% of these cases were happening above San Francisco to the Oregon border, and this was largely falling within the one Humboldt County Sheriff's jurisdiction. And I remember when I was doing my dissertation, there was this thing, I don't remember why they brought it up. It was just like, why would you tell us that? They told us that in an area, to give you a sense, Humboldt and Delaware County together, way at the top of our state, are about as big as New Hampshire or Vermont. I went to school in New Hampshire, so I remember always thinking, holy crap, I can't believe Humboldt's as big as a state. There was, at any given time, only 6 sheriffs on duty in an area roughly the size of a state, which meant if you were in certain parts and you needed help, you had to be ready to help yourself. You were lucky if they came, but no matter what, you were going to have to wait 2 to 3 hours. Even if they wanted to get to you quicker, that's how long the drive time was. So we are actually seeing both a process by which these kind of, it's a rural police force. Most people don't appreciate that like 80% of our police forces in the nation are 20 people or less. So there is, we think of the LAPD, NYPD, these huge police states, separate conversation. On a local level, a great majority of crime is solved, investigated, and tended to by police forces of 20 or less. And particularly in rural areas, you essentially are seeing, if they can't solve it soon, those cases take second precedence to the active cases that are always coming in. And so this is happening in the northern part of the state especially, but we also know that people are coming to these areas to target us and hurt us. They know that there are jurisdictional loopholes that can be exploited. They know that they have the numbers in their odds. There's 6 cops in an area the size of the state. You can get away with murder. And ultimately, the murders are 7 times less likely to be solved. But we're seeing, non-Indians from out of the area perpetrating a great majority of the murders and abductions. And it's not just us, though. You should know that in the 60s, the average, it was like the clearance rate for cases was like 90%. If you're murdered, on average, 90% of the time, they'd figure out who did it. Not bad. 1 out of 10 times, they were really stumped. You'd never know. It's 60% now. And at that same time, we've invested simultaneously millions of dollars into policing. And you have right now a 6 out of 10 chance that if you were murdered, they'd figure out what happened. Everybody's got that chance. For us, obviously, it's disproportionately high because we represent a disproportionate number of those cold cases. I always pause, though, and remind you that it's not just, our women, girls, and Two-Spirit relatives affected by this. It is only our men and boys who stand next to us in many ways in terms of the severity of the outcomes and the chronic conditions we navigate daily. Our men experience multiple health disparities, including high death rates from both chronic and accidental causes. We know that suicide is one of the leading causes of American Indian men, 17 to 24, and that their risk of suicide continues to outpace nearly every other group over the life course. Now, these are the same men who, traditionally speaking, were our protectors and would be in a position to be keeping us safe. They, too, are sick. Like I said, Emily said we have to help our guys first. They are more than 2 times likely than the non-American Indian population to die from homicide. According to the CDC, this is actually the group most likely to die from police violence, and we're incarcerated at a rate 38% higher than the U.S. average for all groups. Now, these numbers are pretty wicked already, but they're actually usually underestimates, because we know if we were to get down to the level of the tribe or in communities where we're seeing a large tribal population, unfortunately, these outcomes usually only get worse. I always say we're at the top of the list if it's a bad thing, the bottom of the list if it's a good thing. It wasn't always like that, and we are going to pivot to prevention, but I wanted to remind you that it's not just the missing and murdered. It's part of this larger experience of violence against Indigenous women. I often share the dark statistic that as an Indigenous woman, I am arguably just as likely to die by homicide as I am heart disease or cancer. I think the other two leading causes of death. The third leading cause of death for American Indian women is homicide. We're also more likely to experience serious violence, kidnapping, and that means that when we are hurt, it's more likely to turn deadly. And again, it's usually a precursor to the disappearance or death. Now, I will be happy to talk more about why this is, but I think I've talked a lot about that, and I want to save the couple minutes before questions for prevention. But ultimately, we need to realize that the points of intervention are so much before someone is taken. While we need to talk about after they go missing through case closure, that is where the conversation needs to be. And the police, I often say, you know, by the time I'm talking to the police, I don't want to be there. No comment, but I just, no one wants to be making that call. And when you think of the ways your family member could have been made safe when you called for help before then, it's galling too to have to make that call. But I have to work with a lot of police, so I give them some due, and that would be that we are asking them in some ways to perform eye surgery with a chainsaw. I can't blame them for not being able to do what I need them to do because they don't have the right tools, and arguably that's not what they're there for. They're there to intervene in a crime happening. That's what the police are for. We need to think of other ways to intervene, and again, it's before we're calling the cops. Now, ultimately, we are actually participating in part of this by speaking on these things. I wanted to not crowd the National Day of Awareness because I probably am on the road, I'm hoping. But that is traditionally when we recognize this. I think, though, that when we save it for that day, we don't recognize that this is their world every day. And so for me, taking time today with you all is part of this intervention. But we also got to ratchet it out and think of where are all of us in this overarching structure of quote unquote rape culture. And I think it goes back again to American Indians make up 1% of the population. I didn't realize where I'm from, making up the community and being a part of the community actively was a very rare occurrence, particularly in California. But I know our world can be different because the world I'm from is different in very key ways, and we're trying to make it more different actually because we are trying to express our sovereignty and keep ourselves safe. And we can't do that alone though, because again, we're only 1% of the population, and we need people outside of our families to care about when our families are hurt. And it's not after a case is opened, it's fostering Indigenous lives before we're taken. It's including things like Indigenous voices on your syllabus. It's pointing out where settler colonialism is. It's everywhere. And you know what? Like, I benefit from it too. I have settler blood, clearly. You know? So, like, let's have a critical discussion about that and dismantle it. Because I think these are very apt words in a global sense to do nothing in times of oppression, right? Sides with the oppressor. And ultimately, Indigenous voices at every table is what we also need, because I can't expect people who don't know us to be able to show up for us. But I do ask that you broker access and you take this knowledge where you go in the rooms that we might not be able to be in. Ultimately, being willing to sit in this space is also major. And I wanted to conclude just generally, like I said, is it's not just what women do and like how to keep them safe. We need to think about the whole system, keeping them safe. Our women are our life givers. There's a French painting, not to make it all tribal. I took French once upon a time. And it's called I think it's called The Beginning of the World. And it's an up-close shot of essentially a lady's pubic area. Because that is the beginning of the world for everybody. And many Indigenous cultures had coming-of-age ceremonies and rituals time and again to honor that specific responsibility. And it's on the level of responsibility versus right.